Hello there, I still have some time before the next films I see at Edinburgh Film Festival, and I've seen some more movies I kinda want to talk about, so I'm just gonna get some reviews out just now. The first one I'm gonna talk about is Yesterday, and it was For those of you who don't know, this is the latest movie from Danny Boyle, who has made some pretty fantastic movies. So based off his name and also the potential of the premise of this movie, I was kind of interested, but I was also pretty let down by this film. Quite honestly, this movie's biggest downfall for me is its script. The story doesn't really hold together if you think about it for more than 1 second. This movie asks you to take some leaps of faith and logic, and I could for some of them, but there are some that are just a bit too ridiculous. The characters were stupid and kind of annoying at times. Some of them were also really goddamn underwritten as well, which did not help. The humor and dialogue often felt forced and out of place. I wouldn't call the script terrible by any means, but it definitely could have used a lot more redrafts. The film's script also has a lot of missed opportunities in what it chooses to cover with the concept. There's one really great scene where the protagonist and Ed Sheeran are having a bet to see who can be a better songwriter and write a song in 10 minutes and whose song is better, and whoever wins is better. And obviously the protagonist winds up being much better. And Ed Sheeran is very visibly insecure about this, knowing that he's been beaten. Which also, while we're here, props to Ed Sheeran for his phenomenal performance in this movie. He wasn't in it much, but Jesus Christ, in this scene his acting was great. And between his acting and the premise of this scene, I was kind of hoping that the film would go more into insecurities of celebrities and the whole idea of knowing there's someone out there who's better than you. It could have made for a very interesting theme and plotline, but they never returned to it, and Ed Sheeran is barely in the film. Instead of focusing on this, they chose to focus on a cliched and uninteresting love story. Instead of having any interesting themes, they went with the most cliche ones possible. Speaking of the acting, it was pretty damn good for the most part, but in a lot of cases I felt like the actors were being too held back. The worst example of this is the lead actor, Himesh Patel. He doesn't really have that much experience, so I can't blame him, and he's definitely got a great voice, but he does not have the charisma or just the acting skill required for some of the scenes in this film. He didn't do a bad job or anything, he just didn't fit the role. Kate McKinnon is also in this film, and it is very, very apparent that she is at her best when she's improvising. Again, she did not do a bad job at all, but the material they gave her just wasn't good. It felt kind of unnatural, and I'm not sure if that's to be blamed on her performance or the writing. Outside of that, I didn't really have any issues in the acting department. The film was really damn well shot for the most part, but there was one aspect to the cinematography that really bugged me. For some reason, the cinematographers thought it would be a great idea to make a lot of the film diagonal. I would understand if it only happened after the initial incident to show, wow, things are really getting shaken up, but it happens before the initial incident as well. It felt purposeful without any purpose and kind of pretentious. The music was very much well done, but I don't really see myself returning to it, although to be fair, I'm not exactly a Beatles fan, so that might be the reason why. But the musical score itself doesn't really have the same excuse. Again, it was not an inherently bad musical score, but it's just one I will never really be returning to. Easily the best aspects of this film were production, set, and costume design. I was also never bored, even if some scenes felt a little too long. All in all, it's fine enough, but it's not really entertaining, and it's not a film I'd really recommend. There are definitely aspects to be appreciated about this film, but for the most part it was just an underwhelming movie that I did not care about and will never watch again. In terms of recent music movies, it was not as good as Rocketman, but it was not as bad as Bohemian Rhapsody. Personally, I would not call this movie worth your time or money, but check it out if you want, I guess. There are definitely worse movies you could be watching right now. And I'm giving Yesterday a 5 out of 10. The other movie I want to talk about is Men in Black International, and it was a soulless, awful cash grab. This is yet another Sony movie that only exists to profit off of name recognition. This is another Ghostbusters, this is another Slenderman, this is another Venom, this is another Holmes and Watson. And sure, it was not as bad as Holmes and Watson, but it was still pretty atrocious. All of the acting was pretty terrible, but in an unnoteworthy way. Everyone just seemed kind of bored and like they didn't want to be there, which does not reflect well on your audience. It was just a very uninvesting performance from nearly everyone involved. The only performance that really stood out to me was Chris Hemsworth, and that was just due to how awful I found out he can be. For some reason, he has 2 different accents in this film. They really can't decide if he's meant to be American or British, and it doesn't help that the British accent is unconvincing as all hell. The story of this movie is dumb and dull and uninspired. The characters are all unlikable, stupid assholes. Every twist this movie tries to pull, you can see coming from a mile away. It's borderline offensive how stupid this film thinks its audience is. Hey, it's a Sony movie, don't worry about it. No one's watching these for the plot, they're just watching these movies because they have names they recognize in them. Sony don't care if the films are any good, they just want money. The film looks like garbage, all of the visual effects were atrocious, the film's color palette is really ugly, none of the framing or shot composition were remotely interesting, and often it was detrimental how boring the film looked. The editing was pretty terrible as well. There's one particularly awful sequence where one of the characters is getting suited up to join the Men in Black. It's so bad that I'm struggling to even find ways to describe it. It's the kind of thing you have to see to understand how awful it is, but at the same time this film isn't worth seeing. The musical composition for the film was overbearing, cliched, and did not fit the scenes it was used in at all. The film also used pre-existing songs, and they're all used in the most obnoxious, annoying ways possible. The film looks like garbage, it sounds like garbage, everyone's acting is garbage, it's written like garbage, it's garbage. Don't see it. Nobody involved in this movie cared. It's awful, it's a soulless cash grab, and speaking completely honestly, this is the worst film I've seen all goddamn year. This movie isn't even enjoyable on a so bad it's good basis. It's just flat out boring. There is nothing to enjoy about this movie whatsoever. It's just an annoying and boring and obnoxious movie that I cannot recommend on any level, and I honestly hope fails. Don't see it, it's atrocious. And I'm giving Men in Black International a well-deserved 0 out of 10. That's the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe, I'm bad at outros, and I'll see you in whatever I do next.